Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to Careers at the End of the World. I am your host, Jenn Walker Wall, and I am the founder of Work Wonders Careers. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about how to assess your job search. If you've been on our website, you may have noticed that on all of our service pages, we have an assessment process. We ask folks who are interested in potentially working with us to complete this assessment form and send along some information about themselves as well as their resume. And the reason we do that is we use the assessment process as a way to help people select a service that is going to help solve their problems. And there's a reason we offer multiple services, and that's because people need different things. I want to walk you through my assessment process. I'm the one who does the assessments, and just kind of tell you a little bit about what I'm looking for so that I can make a recommendation about what to do about it. Now, how will this be helpful for you? It's really important to take a beat and figure out where you're at, okay? Because not every job seeker needs the exact same thing. And whether you're fresh to the process or you've been here for a while, it makes a lot of sense every several weeks to really recap and think about what's been going on. So let me just walk you through today quickly how I do this so that you can operationalize it for yourself. So in general, I'm looking for tactical bottlenecks or roadblocks. Sometimes people reach out and they haven't started their job search yet. They're looking for someone to help them initiate. And getting started is really one of the hardest parts of the process. I mean, maintaining momentum has its challenges, but at least you're working with some assets that you've spent some time. You've invested time in figuring out your target roles, like you have a direction. So starting can be really tricky. The good news is when those folks reach out, they generally know exactly where they are. They're having trouble maybe figuring out target roles. Maybe they know exactly what they want to do, but they don't have an updated resume or LinkedIn, or they just, I hear from a lot of people, honestly, who just want to make a strategic move, who have like a good sense of where they'd like to go and where they'd like to be. And they just want to have a good process to help get them there and present themselves optimally. So if you haven't really started, if you are in a state of scrolling, but not applying or not networking, then I would say you don't really have a job search, and that's okay. But that's the first thing that we want to do is figure out which of these obstacles is a challenge for you. Are you having a hard time figuring out what your target roles are? Are you planning a pivot? Do you just need a little bit of time to explore? Do you need to, figure out exactly, how to select the exact right roles for the level, the years of experience, the years of expertise you've put in? What's getting in the way here of you taking your first step? It's rare, but sometimes the answer is nothing. Sometimes they're like, hey, I just heard you're good at helping people with their job search, and I want to invest some time in doing this the best way possible, the most efficient way, the most effective way. And so in that case, there really is no problem to be solved. It's so much as it's a matter of getting them on my calendar. But for some people, I think starting is tricky. Okay. And so this is something I look for in these assessments. Does someone come to me and say, I know I want to be applying to X roles. I'm very busy. I've got kids, I've got a family, I've got, a busy life, I got a busy job. I just need someone to produce a resume and a LinkedIn profile that I can use and adopt for different kinds of jobs. And those assessment forms come in, and those people are clear about their target roles. They know where they want to go. They don't need a lot of help or hand-holding assessing roles for themselves. They're motivated to pursue new opportunities. And what they're asking for is the assets, right? Like they're one or more asset to help them in their process. They're not that interested in trying to figure out how to write a strong resume all on their own. And that kind of person can be really well suited for one of our resume services, our Resonate services. We've got 3 different kinds. And so in that case, when I see an intake come in like that, I think, okay, what you're missing is a resume and a LinkedIn profile and a cover letter. And here's how we can help you generate those. And another type of client comes in and will say something in their intake form like, I need a resume, but then they'll also provide context about how their confidence is low. They've been struggling for a while. They're undervalued and treated poorly in their job, and it's really taken a toll in their confidence. And so whenever someone comes in on an assessment form, talking about a resume, but also spending most of the responses talking about the toll that a lack of confidence has taken in slowing them down and preventing them from starting or getting going, I almost never recommend a resume service. A resume provides a very specific thing, and it works best as a service for people who know that that's exactly what they need. If what you need is a stronger resume and someone to help you understand and reclaim your contributions and strengths and value, I would always recommend a job search strategy service in that case. I don't think something like lack of confidence, years of being undervalued, being in toxic workplaces is simply remedied by having a better resume. I think that's really remedied with a longer runway, more opportunity to reflect and integrate some of our conversations and to really recraft an entirely different narrative, not just for your resume, but internally as well. So those are always two things I'm looking for. Is this really someone who is ready for a resume and that's going to solve their problem? Or is this someone who needs a little bit more support in a different form? The good news is, in 2 of our 3 job search strategy services, I still write resumes for people. So it's not like you don't necessarily get the asset you're looking for with the bulk of it done by someone else. But it's one thing to sit down with someone who's clear and confident and ready to job search and excited to job search and just wants you to bring their resume up to date and to position it and update it and all that stuff. And it's another to hear from someone who's really struggling in another way. And I just want to say that I don't think a resume is going to solve all of your job search problems. It's going to solve the problem of effectively communicating your qualifications to specific roles. And that's a big thing. It's not a small thing. I've really learned to be careful to not promote that service as a Band-Aid for bigger challenges that people are facing. It's not cheap, quite frankly, to have us write your resume. And I don't want us to produce an asset that sits on your desktop or more likely in Google Docs, right? And just doesn't get used because you are still feeling insecure and unsure and not confident. So that's why it's more helpful to work with people like that in a longer package, something like Align, which allows us to spend more time talking, spend more time rewriting stories, and really taking ownership over your career, your work, your contributions, and the job search process from here. So if you've been struggling on your own, especially if you haven't started your job search yet, I think it's really helpful to get curious about why. And do you need something simple, quote unquote simple, like a resume? Or is there something more complicated going on with writing your resume? Resume writing is often a smaller portion than our career coaching. It fluctuates a little bit, but for the most part, I do far more career coaching than I do solely resume writing. It's not that I only write executive resumes, because that's not true at all, but I do write a lot of executive resumes. People who come in very clear about what roles they're looking for, what needs to be on their resume, and people who kind of tiptoe in and are I think I need a resume, but I'm really struggling. They tend to need something else. Another kind of client who comes in is someone who is struggling to land interviews. So they have a resume, they've been using the resume. Those are both 2 good things, but they're struggling when it comes to actually getting traction using their resume. And this can sometimes be a really obvious fix when I learn a little bit more. So sometimes I will look at their resume and have a sense of where they're going and be oh, I can see that there's an obvious mismatch here. But I will say in a competitive market, I think often what happens is that a good resume isn't good enough, and it needs to be great. It really needs to be carefully aligned. And that's why I did an episode on the passive job search, because right now the strategy that appears to be working for most of our clients is going deep, fewer jobs, better, prompter, more tailored applications, rather than a huge volume-based search, which often means that people are not doing the kind of tailoring that they could be. So some questions I always ask folks is how many jobs have you applied for and over how long? And sometimes people will be I've applied for 20 jobs in the last week. And I'll think to myself, okay, that's really not helpful. Not in a bad way. It's good that you're tracking, but a week is not actually enough time to figure out if your resume is working or not. And it's okay to reach out and we can talk about it. And I can often tell by looking at a resume if your resume is going to be helpful or not. So it's okay to reach out. You don't have to wait like 6 or 8 weeks before reaching out for some help. But I will say that sometimes my answer to people is like, I suspect you're going to need more time to know for sure that your resume is not working, but here's what I see. XYZ could be improved here to better your chances of landing an interview. Oftentimes, people are applying to jobs they're significantly underqualified for. And while that might have been an okay thing in 2022, 2021, it is really not a winning strategy these days. It's a very different job market. And so many people last switched jobs just a few years ago, and it was just a completely different experience. Like, you're probably not going to be able to replicate that. I'm not able to replicate that. I don't think most people will be. And so the precision is really important. Choosing the right jobs is really important. I will also say that another thing that comes up around this, even for our current clients, is that like there's just not that many jobs to choose from. Sometimes the jobs get posted in waves. It's not like a nice like, oh, here's 5 jobs a week that you can apply for. It's like very few, very few, very few, and then like 10 or 8 all at once, right? Like just like a kind of a windfall, which is not optimal, but nonetheless better than 0, I'd say. So sometimes when I say to people, how many jobs have you applied for and over how long? Sometimes that number is really, really low, like way too low to even sort of like make an assessment about whether their resume is working for them or what else they might need to do. And so in that case, what I'll often say is like, this is a low number. What's the story behind the low number? And I say this without any judgment and just pure curiosity. Like, are you having a hard time finding right jobs? Are you super busy and burned out in your current work or life scenario and you just have a hard time making time to do this work? Have you been sick or had any like major, personal things that are just taking your attention away from the job search? And those things are actually really common obstacles. And having the continuity and external accountability of a career coach or some kind of program or community to keep you on track and to let you plug in can be really helpful for people who are working adults with a lot of responsibilities and obligations and reasonably have a hard time making time for things like a job search. I always try to explore what's behind a low volume job search. It could also be that they just started, that's another thing. So I hope that you can ask yourself these questions without judgment too, because it's really just a matter of us figuring out do you need some accountability? Do you need a better resume? Do you need some combination, which is usually where most people fall? The answer here can be really, really helpful. So take it easy on yourself, because the more you can be curious, the more you can be helpful to yourself here. The judgment won't help, I promise. And then this other roadblock that I see quite a bit is landing an offer, right? Like sometimes they've got the resume, they are job searching consistently, they're even interviewing consistently, they're making it through multiple rounds consistently. But what's happening is that they're having trouble securing an offer. And previously, like before the last 15 to 18 months or so, I would say once a year, I would have a client who kind of would get stuck in a cycle, maybe 2 or 3 times of being a finalist, but not getting an offer. So it's not super uncommon that I would see this. It just seemed like one time a year, a client would have bad luck, and it would be a struggle to watch them, kind of navigate this. But the truth is this: if you are consistently applying for jobs, using your resume, landing interviews, moving through the interview process multiple times, that actually tells me you're great at this. Okay, so I think a lot of people come to me and are like, what's wrong? Why am I not interviewing well? That's not always my takeaway. My takeaway is that you're doing great. Especially right now, if this is your scenario, it's telling me that the tactical pieces of a job search are working for you. You have the right assets, you have the right target jobs, you're doing well enough in the resume piece and the interviewing piece to move forward through the process. So one question I ask here to kind of figure out if there is work for us to do is do you like these jobs? Like, are you actually interested in these jobs? And you might be surprised to find that like sometimes the answers are real mixed on this. And so that's always a helpful question to ask first if you're getting stuck in these loops, is like, do you actually want these jobs? It's very difficult to compete with other qualified, enthusiastic people. And if you are merely qualified, I can see why that would keep you stuck in multiple ways, quite frankly. I don't love the performance of like work enthusiasm, as you probably know or can guess, but nonetheless, I actually think it's very important. So that's a question I often ask people. And then I also ask people, how do you feel like these interviews are going? Do you wish it was smoother for you? Are you having trouble? And honestly, when people say like, no, I feel confident, which is probably the minority of people, but nonetheless, I think it's important to note that like, you can be good at interviewing and not get the job. You can be good at interviewing and not get the job multiple times. You can be a great candidate, perform great, be a great match, and still not get the job. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the case. And it's definitely the case in this market, but it's also always been true. It's not really that different than advice I would have given 3 or 4 years ago. So sometimes, yes, sometimes some refining of storytelling for interviews can be helpful here. You won't see it on my webpage on our services, but I do offer an interview prep service for people who reach out, where we work specifically on storytelling for specific jobs so that you can sort of get the reps in on, talking about yourself and telling those stories and making them concise and punchy and relevant and all that good stuff. But there's also been times where people have come to me and we've started from scratch. We've started looking at target jobs all over again, because I think what they realized when I ask a question like, do you want these jobs? The answer is sometimes no. It's really not uncommon. So I really want you to sit with that, because to me that it's so interesting, that paradox of like being able to consistently land not just interviews, but like be a finalist multiple times in a row, but for opportunities that you really know are misaligned for you, like not where you want to be. Maybe a good reflection of like where you've been, what you've done, and what's most evident about your strengths, but not necessarily where you want to be. And that shows up. It shows up. And this is one of the ways it shows up. So our service like Align or even Career Alchemy could be good options for folks who are like, you know what, I have come all this way, but I've gone in the wrong direction. And there's no shame in that. I feel like it sounds like starting from scratch, but a lot of times I think it's a big relief when people are like, yeah, I don't actually want to be doing this. It's easy to pursue opportunities where getting traction isn't that hard. I get that. I like low-hanging fruit as well. I'm a Taurus Mars. So like, I like what's easy. On the other hand, like, I think we can sometimes only do that for so long successfully if we know at some level it's really misaligned for us. So check in with yourself about that, because again, there's no judgment. It's just a question to get curious about. Is like, is this the right direction for you? If you are not tracking your job search, I really encourage you to do so, because sometimes I will ask people to like share their tracker with me. This happens less in assessment and happens more when I'm working with a client and, they've put their first 8 weeks in, and then we want to look and see what's been going on. And without a tracker, it's very difficult to make sense. I really don't want people keeping this data in their head, because this is an emotional process. And I think it's very easy to kind of, allow your job search progress to simply be reflective of where you are in like any given day in the process, which may not be the best indicator. Please track the jobs you're applying for. Please track when you applied for them. I've also been asking clients to look at the number of other applicants based on what LinkedIn is saying. Now, I want to be clear, if you're looking at jobs and you see that LinkedIn says like hundreds of people have applied, usually within a couple days, I want to be clear that I think what they're measuring there are clicks. I do not think that's reflective necessarily of the applicant pool, but I do see it as a helpful relative indicator for like how much interest there is in those jobs. So I don't take it literally, because I don't think LinkedIn knows. And I, by the way, click I click all day long on links in LinkedIn for jobs that I have no intention of applying for. And even if I did, I promise I wouldn't be a threat because they're for client jobs. I would be a silly little candidate in a lot of these applicant pools. So I think there's just a lot of clicking around, and there's a lot of people looking and being curious and sending jobs to friends and that kind of thing. But I do think it's helpful because if you applied for the job 2 weeks after, it's been up and there's 800 people according to LinkedIn who've already applied, that gives us a sense of like, okay, this applicant pool filled quickly. Perhaps it's a very in-demand kind of job versus like if you're submitting all of your applications or most of your applications, within like 48 hours of a job being posted. That gives me a sense of like, okay, maybe your resume got seen, but in some of these, especially remote job searches, quite frankly, it's just there can be such a high volume that I think being strategic is really hard. So I would just pay attention to those pieces. How long has the job been posted? What is LinkedIn saying? I ask my clients to kind of track that sometimes just so that we can make sense of what we're seeing. And a lot of times what I see is that on those trackers, if clients aren't interviewing, it does seem to me like their volume is low. But again, why that volume is low is not really a place for judgment. It's a place for observation and potential action. If there's just a few jobs available, then we might want to expand the number of like tactics that we're using here. We might want to think about doing some proactive relationship building or seeing if there's other things that are coming up and causing hesitation to apply. It's not uncommon that when I look at someone's job search tracker, I can tell right away what the issue is, especially if I've already seen their resume and know that they're working with a relatively strong resume. Another thing that comes up, and this happens with like potential clients and clients too, is just making sure that the tailoring of the job and specifically the summary of qualifications for us, that is done in a top-notch way. And I am very heavy-handed when I do this. I take nothing for granted. I do not use it as a creative writing exercise to the best of my ability, short of like copying and pasting the qualifications into a summary. I want to be holding up like a billboard, like the biggest flag, like, hello, we're super qualified. We check all your boxes. The level of alignment between what I would do on a resume and what my clients do, I have to nudge them to be a little bit more aggressive and direct in the language on the summary of qualifications. And over the years, I have said like a really strong summary of qualifications can really change people's job search. And in part, there's two things happening here. I say this all the time, but I think it's really important for people to remember this. Like part of that is because you're choosing the right jobs. It's really difficult to write a strong summary of qualifications if you're not actually well qualified for the job. So I think one of the reasons our clients have so much success with resumes is because in the process of crafting that really helps them figure out like, am I a good candidate for this job or is this a bit of a reach? And reach jobs are fine. But if you are searching with any sort of urgency, I would keep the reach jobs to like 10, 15% of my overall applications. And I would keep the bulk of the applications squarely where I can make a really strong case for my candidacy. Now, I said in an earlier episode, my go-to job search strategy for 2025 is going to be a passive job search approach, a passive job search mindset. And that's because I think there will be a low volume of jobs. I don't know if it'll be this low, it'll be lower, if it'll be higher, but still low relative to what we've experienced. Probably some combination of those things. That would be my best guess, but my best guess is just that. I would use some of these questions and milestones to assess your own career and figure out like what's getting in my way. Are you essentially, haunted by previous jobs not going well, not feeling confident? That is such a significant headwind for job seekers and for the folks that I work with. Or are you someone who's like, I'm good. I know exactly where I'm going. I realize it'll take a little bit of time and elbow grease, but if you just give me a resume, I think I'll get there. That kind of person would be well suited for one of our Resonate strategies. You could do the strategy session. You could do, you could hand the whole thing off to me and my team. Either way, could be totally fine. You've got options there. I actually am a really big fan of the Resonate strategy session, but we can only do like a resume. We can't do a resume, LinkedIn, and cover letter in there, but you can book multiple sessions. I've only had one client do that, but she needed 2 resumes for 2 different kinds of jobs. And she got an interview using the resume that we redid pretty much right away. So if you need help with your resume strategy, if you think that is your bottleneck, if energetically you're good to go, if you're clear, if you're relatively confident, I know confidence is not like a zero-sum game here, but then the Resonate strategies make a lot of sense. Otherwise, I hope you check out one of our job search strategy services. And the cool thing about both Align and Career Alchemy is I will still write your resume for you, actually, and you'll get access to our job search community cohort. So all of the programming that we have available, the office hours calls, the community chat channel, all of the on-demand resources we have, those are available to you as part of this as well. And we do have a new winter job search community cohort starting up next month, which is not that far away. We're basically at the end of January. So we're starting in February, and the early bird goes through January 31st. I love the community cohorts. I think it's such a lovely way in these challenging times to carve out a little space, to make progress, to get personalized feedback. So even if you're not up for a one-on-one engagement, please check out our winter job search community cohort. The folks there are just lovely, and everyone is just really encouraging and helpful and thoughtful. We have co-working opportunities for people to kind of plug in and put their heads down. We have drop-in office hours that you can attend. And all of this is available to folks who work with us privately in Align and Career Alchemy, but it's also available as a standalone offering once a quarter. If you'd like to join us this winter, we would love to have you. So check the show notes for more information. And no matter what, I want you to think about, what are my specific challenges? How granular can you get about your challenges and what you need to overcome them? Because that's going to be really important. I know some people will sort of like apply to nothing and like shut down a little bit, or people will apply to everything and kind of go into hyperspeed. And I really think the place to be is somewhere in the middle. And sometimes to kind of slow down and to be strategic, be intentional, it helps to not do it alone. So if there's anything that I can do to support your job search, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can come on over to our website, fill out an assessment form, join us in the winter community cohort if that works better for you. We'd love to see you. I would love to see you and meet you and work with you this winter to help you get your job search off the ground. I will talk to you soon. Take care.